The Bible tells us in Exodus 15, it talks about Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea.
From Sunday school teachings to Hollywood epics, the parting of the Red Sea stands as one of history's most retold miracles. Yet behind the faith and legend lingers a haunting question. Did it truly happen? Brace yourself, because what follows is astonishing. A team of modern salvage divers recently plunged into the Red Sea, not to uncover gold, but to pursue a mystery buried for thousands of years. They've discovered Pharaoh's lost chariot wheel, and the implications are deeply unsettling. Let's uncover what they found beneath the waves. What salvage divers just found in the Red Sea. History has always carried its fair share of mysteries, tales that stretch across continents and centuries, keeping archaeologists busy trying to prove whether they truly happened or never did at all. One such pursuit has led researchers to Nuweiba Beach, along the Gulf of Aqaba, a place long rumored to be the watery grave of the Egyptian army that chased Moses and the Israelites into the Red Sea. For centuries, the Red Sea has been more than just a strip of water. It's been a question etched into time. From Sunday school classrooms to Hollywood's grandest scenes, it's the setting of one of history's most dramatic moments. Moses raising his staff, the waters dividing, and an empire's might swallowed whole. Now in 2024, that same sea has once again become a stage, this time for a modern mystery that's left archaeologists, believers, and skeptics alike holding their breath. The story begins with a small but elite crew, salvage divers, sonar experts, and underwater archaeologists. They weren't treasure hunters. They weren't looking for gold or lost ships. They were after something far stranger. Proof that a 3,000-year-old miracle might have left physical evidence behind. Their mission? To revisit a set of GPS coordinates first marked by an explorer named Wyatt more than 4 decades ago. Wyatt had claimed to have found Egyptian chariot wheels resting quietly on the floor of the Red Sea. At the time, the world laughed it off. But the 2024 team wanted to see for themselves, armed with equipment Wyatt could only have dreamed of: submersible drones, 3D sonar scanners, and high-resolution underwater cameras capable of capturing every grain of sand. The descent began at dawn. The sea was calm, too calm. As the divers slipped beneath the surface, the temperature dropped, the light dimmed, and all that remained was the rhythmic ping of sonar bouncing into the deep. Beams of light cut through the green-blue murk, revealing shifting sand and coral fields that looked ancient, untouched. Every minute felt heavier than the last. Then one of the scanners pinged, hard, a dense metallic reading right below them. The team slowed their movements, brushing away centuries of sediment, and there it was. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a coral ring, but as more sand cleared, its edges began to take shape. Symmetrical, circular, unmistakably crafted. The divers froze. What they were staring at wasn't a rock formation. It was a wheel with 4, maybe 6 spokes. The camera zoomed in. Coral covered most of the surface, but through a small crack, a faint glimmer peeked through, a golden sheen. It wasn't polished gold, not anymore, but the metal beneath was unmistakable. The divers exchanged stunned glances. One wheel could be a coincidence. But there were more. Moving along the seabed, they found 2, then 3 more formations, all aligned as if caught in motion, frozen in time. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Metallic fragments embedded in coral, traces of wooden frames long decayed, and scattered along the ocean floor were bones, human bones, and not just 1 or 2. A diver's voice crackled through the comms. "This is not good." At first, the team thought his oxygen levels were dropping or that he'd hit a technical snag. But when his helmet cam feed appeared on the ship's monitor, the entire control room went silent. The screen showed a tangled mass of coral and bone, skulls, ribs, and femurs, all intertwined with spears and splintered wheels. This wasn't a shipwreck. It was something else entirely. The formations didn't look random. They were clustered in groups, aligned in a way that suggested movement, almost as if an army had been charging forward when something catastrophic struck. It was eerie, like stepping into a moment from a story everyone thought was just legend. Above the surface, the team radioed for retrieval. A remotely operated drone lifted a single piece, a horse skull, half buried in sand and seagrass. When it reached the deck, the atmosphere turned electric. The skull was sent for DNA analysis, and the results were jaw-dropping. It matched an ancient Egyptian breed used to pull royal chariots. That single confirmation, paired with the wheel-like structures, suggested this was no ordinary wreck. The patterns, the materials, even the size matched the kind of chariots used by Pharaoh Ramses II's army, the very ruler who, according to the book of Exodus, chased Moses and his followers into the Red Sea and never came back. As the divers pressed deeper, they found what looked like an axle half buried in the sea floor. The sonar scans revealed its perfect cylindrical shape, exactly the dimensions of an Egyptian war chariot axle. Metallurgists consulted via satellite confirmed that the alloy composition aligned with known samples from late Bronze Age Egypt. But here's the thing: they couldn't move it. The coral had claimed it. After thousands of years, the ocean had turned these objects into stone sculptures, fusing history and nature into one inseparable mass. Attempting to lift or clean them would mean destroying them completely. One of the divers described it perfectly. They're ghosts. You can't touch them, but you feel them watching you. By the end of the week, they had cataloged dozens of finds: metal fragments, shattered spears, and bones scattered in a long trail beneath the waves. For believers, the discovery was awe-inspiring, a possible physical trace of one of history's most powerful miracles. For skeptics, it was deeply unsettling. Because if these really were the remains of Pharaoh's army, then the line between myth and history just got dangerously thin. When the team finally surfaced, they weren't celebrating. No one was cheering. The weight of what they had seen sank in slowly. As one diver said later in an interview, "We went looking for a story. What we found felt like judgment." So could it be true? Did the Red Sea actually swallow Pharaoh's army? Maybe, maybe not. But the evidence, those wheels, bones, and fragments, refused to be ignored. And here's the twist. These divers weren't the first to see something like this. Decades ago, one man had already claimed it. He didn't have sonar or drones or DNA tests, just conviction and a camera. And the world called him crazy. The truth behind the expedition. It began quietly. No press releases, no academic conferences, no flashy documentaries. Just a few encrypted emails, a handful of coded shipments, and a name that kept resurfacing like a ghost from history: Ron Wyatt. For decades, Wyatt's name had been both legend and cautionary tale. A nurse-turned-explorer, he claimed to have found everything from Noah's Ark to the Ark of the Covenant, and was dismissed by mainstream scholars as a fantasist. Still, his story of the Red Sea chariot wheels refused to die. It lingered in documentaries, internet forums, and late-night theological debates, waiting for technology to catch up. Now, half a century later, it finally had. This 2024 operation was meticulously planned, and secrecy wasn't paranoia. It was protection. Many on the team remembered how Wyatt had been mocked and banned from sites. They weren't going to repeat his mistakes. The mission was funded entirely by private donors, quiet patrons of biblical archaeology who preferred anonymity. Some were wealthy adventurers, others were devout believers who saw this not just as science, but as a spiritual duty. Together, they pooled millions into what one insider described as the most discreet archaeological dive of the decade. Traditional institutions wanted no part of it. Proposals sent to universities and cultural ministries were politely rejected, or in some cases flat out laughed at. One Israeli official reportedly quipped, "There's nothing there but coral and conspiracy." But behind the laughter, there was also fear. Fear of being proven wrong. The crew itself was a blend of the bold and the brilliant. Marine engineers, ex-military divers, and AI imaging specialists, all bound by curiosity and a hint of rebellion. Their equipment looked like something straight out of a sci-fi film. 3D sonar scanners that could map the ocean floor in astonishing detail, autonomous underwater drones equipped with hyperspectral cameras, and AI-driven sediment analyzers capable of detecting man-made metals even after centuries underwater. Unlike Wyatt's 1970s dives, done with little more than scuba gear and faith, this expedition combined precision engineering and stealth. Every move was logged, every reading encrypted. Some team members worked in the open, pretending to test sonar systems. Others stayed completely off the radar, operating under aliases. It wasn't just about discovery. It was about staying invisible until the right moment. Their destination, Nuweiba Beach on the Egyptian side of the Gulf of Aqaba, wasn't chosen at random. Satellite data had long shown something curious about the seabed there. A shallow ridge connecting two opposite shores, like a natural underwater bridge. Could it be the crossing path described in the book of Exodus? Skeptics called it coincidence. Believers called it divine design. The 2024 team called it their waypoint. Even with the money and the tech, the operation nearly didn't happen. Bureaucratic red tape strangled early progress. Environmental officials warned against disturbing the coral beds. Rumors of government interference began circulating. Some even claimed local authorities were pressured to deny permits. But after months of persistence, the team quietly got the green light. One of the divers later joked, "We had more clearance codes than a spy mission." And in a sense, that's exactly what it was. A covert dive into one of history's deepest mysteries. The motivation ran deeper than curiosity. For some, this was about vindicating Ron Wyatt's legacy. To prove that the man so often dismissed as a dreamer might have been onto something after all. For others, it was about faith. The hope that tangible evidence of the Exodus could bridge the gap between scripture and science. But there was also a thrill to it. The pulse of adventure, the danger, the possibility that they might uncover something the world wasn't ready for. They knew the risks. If they failed, they'd be ridiculed like Wyatt. But if they succeeded, they'd rewrite history, and perhaps belief itself. But who is the man that's brought about this much dedication despite the ridicule he faced? Keep watching to find out. The man behind the claims, Ron Wyatt. Before there were drones, sonar scanners, or viral YouTube documentaries about lost miracles, there was a man and his faith. His name was Ron Wyatt, and if history remembers him as anything, it's as the most unlikely explorer ever to challenge the world's top archaeologists. Wyatt wasn't a scholar from Oxford or a tenured professor with excavation grants. He was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee, a man whose day job was putting people to sleep before surgery. But by night and on every vacation he could afford, he was out chasing the physical traces of the Bible. Where others read scripture for devotion, Ron Wyatt read it like a treasure map. And in his mind, every line of that map led to something real. Wyatt's obsession began in the 1970s, at a time when biblical archaeology was both fashionable and fiercely debated. But while academics debated translation nuances, Wyatt bought plane tickets and shovels. His first great adventure took him to Mount Ararat in Turkey, where he claimed to have found the remains of Noah's Ark. Later, he announced discoveries that would make Indiana Jones blush: the Ark of the Covenant, the true Mount Sinai, even the site of Jesus' crucifixion. Each claim was bigger, bolder, and met with louder laughter from the scientific community. Yet the ridicule never seemed to shake him. Wyatt was driven by what he called a divine calling, to prove that the Bible wasn't just metaphor or myth, but literal history carved into the earth. His wife once said he couldn't sit through a sermon without wanting to fly out and find the site himself. And by 1978, his compass was pointing toward one of the oldest mysteries of all, the parting of the Red Sea. According to the book of Exodus, Pharaoh's army pursued Moses and the fleeing Israelites into the sea, only to be swallowed by the returning waters. For centuries, it was a story of faith, not science. But Ron Wyatt wanted to see if there was anything left behind. In 1978, during a dive in the Gulf of Aqaba near Nuweiba Beach, he claimed to have found exactly that: coral-encrusted chariot wheels, scattered human bones, and even horse remains lying eerily preserved on the seabed. To Wyatt, it was proof, not myth. He took photos, logged coordinates, and shared his findings. But when he brought them to experts, the response was brutal. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed his evidence as pseudoscience, arguing that the coral shapes were natural formations, not wheels. Others accused him of misinterpreting geological features or, worse, of staging his discoveries. But Wyatt held firm. He released reports, spoke in interviews, and built a devoted following who saw him as a modern-day believer standing against the establishment. To them, he wasn't a fraud. He was a man ahead of his time. Ron Wyatt's story quickly became one of the most polarizing in archaeology. Yet the controversy only fueled his legend. Wyatt's followers flooded churches, forums, and early internet chat rooms with photos, diagrams, and testimonies. They pointed to every blurry shape on the seabed as another wheel, another bone, another piece of divine proof. It's easy to write Wyatt off as just another eccentric chasing miracles. But if you look closer, his story feels complicated. He wasn't running a scam empire or living off fame. In fact, he often paid for expeditions out of his own pocket. He wasn't trained, yes, but he was relentless, fueled by a blend of faith, obsession, and curiosity that refused to die. He genuinely believed that he was uncovering God's fingerprints on Earth, and that belief made him dangerous to both skeptics and believers alike. Some accused him of mixing faith with fantasy. Others said he had stumbled upon something real, but the world wasn't ready to accept it. When Ron Wyatt died in 1999, his name left behind a long shadow. To the academic world, he was a cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when faith trumps science. To his supporters, he was a prophet of proof who died before seeing his discoveries vindicated. And now, decades later, the divers retracing his steps in the Red Sea are forcing that question back into the light. Was Ron Wyatt just a dreamer lost in his own imagination? Or was he onto something science wasn't ready to face? Because if even one of his claims turns out to be true, it would shake the foundations of both archaeology and faith. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the world laughed at him. Not because he was wrong, but because he might have been dangerously close to right. But how did Ron Wyatt explain the missing evidence to back his claims up? Let's find out. Ron Wyatt's explanation: the chariot wheel mystery. If you ask anyone who's ever gone down the Pharaoh's chariot wheel rabbit hole online, one name pops up every single time: Ron Wyatt. The man who, with nothing more than scuba gear, conviction, and an unshakable belief in the Bible, claimed to have found the lost wheels of Pharaoh's army beneath the Red Sea. And even now, decades later, his explanations for why his discoveries were never officially confirmed still echo across both religious and scientific circles. When critics demanded to know why he didn't bring up a single artifact, Wyatt had answers, 4 of them to be exact. And whether you see them as excuses or legitimate barriers depends entirely on which side of the debate you stand. Wyatt often said that Egypt's government had zero interest in letting him or anyone dig around the seabed. He claimed he was warned repeatedly that unauthorized excavations were illegal, especially in areas considered historically sensitive. To him, this wasn't bureaucracy, it was obstruction. He believed officials knew what was down there, they just didn't want anyone confirming it. This was perhaps his most convincing argument. According to Wyatt, the supposed chariot wheels he saw weren't just lying freely on the seafloor, they were fused to coral. Over millennia, calcium buildup had turned metal into stone, wrapping every surface in living armor. Trying to pry them loose, he said, would destroy them completely. It was like trying to dig a fossil out of concrete with your bare hands. Wyatt's expeditions weren't university-funded ventures with million-dollar budgets. They were church basement fundraisers and personal savings missions. He didn't have access to the kind of resources major archaeological teams use: submersibles, retrieval cranes, or government permits. And when he reached out to institutions for help, they laughed him off. "No one funds fairy tales," one official reportedly told him. Wyatt's final explanation was the most controversial: that his work was actively suppressed. He claimed religious and political authorities feared what his discoveries would mean, that proving a biblical event would ignite theological chaos, upsetting the delicate line between faith and fact. In his words, the world isn't ready to see God's fingerprints. In the years that followed, Wyatt backed his claims with interviews, photos, and even grainy video footage that showed coral formations shaped like wheels and axles. For believers, this was visual gold, proof that he wasn't making things up. Archival clips show Wyatt standing before church audiences, calmly explaining his theories with a scientist's precision and a preacher's passion. He would draw diagrams of the underwater land bridge connecting Nuweiba Beach to the Arabian Peninsula, highlighting how it matched the geography described in Exodus. Scientists, however, weren't impressed. Marine biologists pointed out that coral often forms in symmetrical shapes that can easily mimic man-made objects. Others argued that Wyatt's golden wheel was likely a trick of light. Still, those old recordings continue to resurface online, now enhanced and reanalyzed with modern AI imaging. And strangely enough, some of those shapes do look eerily manufactured. By the early 1990s, Ron Wyatt had been branded a pseudoscientist. Academic journals refused to publish his findings, government agencies denied him excavation permits, and even some creationist organizations, groups that might have been his allies, distanced themselves, saying his methods lacked scientific rigor. But that didn't stop him. He continued to travel, film, and lecture until his death. One of the most fascinating aspects of Wyatt's claims remains the coral itself. Scientists interviewed in later documentaries explained that coral can only grow on solid surfaces. It needs a base, so when sonar images revealed wheel-like coral formations sitting independently on the seabed, it raised eyebrows. A marine engineer admitted that if coral had formed in the shape of a wheel, something must have existed there before it, since nature does not create perfect circles underwater without assistance. Still, skepticism remains the rule. Coral can attach to just about anything: rocks, shells, even debris from modern ships. And after centuries underwater, distinguishing what's ancient from what's recent is almost impossible. While Wyatt's evidence faded into obscurity, one documentary narrator said years later, his theories refused to die, waiting for technology to catch up. And maybe that's the truth of it all. Whether you call him a fraud, a visionary, or something in between, Ron Wyatt left behind more than controversy. He left behind a question that no one's been able to silence: what if he was right all along? Pharaoh's wheel controversy, global reaction. For decades, Ron Wyatt's story sat quietly in the dusty corners of biblical archaeology, a fringe legend whispered in church documentaries and late-night YouTube uploads. But then, out of nowhere, the internet rediscovered him. It began, as these things often do, with a video. A blurry clip surfaced online, divers swimming through the deep blue of the Gulf of Aqaba, their flashlights cutting through curtains of silt. The camera lingered on a circular formation, a coral-encrusted ring eerily resembling a wheel. Someone added a dramatic caption: "Pharaoh's chariot wheel found in the Red Sea." That was all it took. Within hours, the footage spread like wildfire. Hashtags exploded. News outlets scrambled for context. Suddenly, a decades-old claim was front-page news again. Some called it the discovery of the century, others a laughable hoax. Believers flooded comment sections with Bible verses, declaring it divine confirmation, the ultimate told-you-so moment for faith. Science is finally catching up with Scripture, one viral post read. Another wrote, "The sea kept its secrets until now. Praise be to God." Skeptics naturally had a field day. Reddit threads dissected the footage frame by frame. Some insisted it was just coral shaped by coincidence. Others accused video editors of trickery. Memes appeared overnight. Pharaoh's army photoshopped into underwater theme parks, complete with skeleton chariots racing dolphins. Even professional scientists were drawn into the chaos. Marine geologists pointed out that coral can form perfect circles under the right conditions. One sarcastically tweeted, "If coral can grow in the shape of SpongeBob, it can grow like a wheel." Still, the debate refused to fade. Something about the imagery, the possibility that an ancient miracle might have left a physical trace, had struck a nerve. Within days, the mainstream media caught wind. News anchors on every continent began their segments with the same dramatic question: did divers just find evidence of the Exodus? Morning shows debated it between cooking segments. Documentaries dusted off old Wyatt interviews. And then came the moment that pushed the story into cultural overdrive: Greg Gutfeld's reaction. During his nightly broadcast, the famously irreverent host played the viral footage and quipped, "So let me get this straight. Moses split the sea, Pharaoh's army followed, and now we've got underwater traffic jams?" The studio laughed, but Gutfeld wasn't done. "Honestly, if they find license plates down there, I'm converting." That one line was clipped, reposted, and memed across every platform imaginable. The debate wasn't just scientific anymore, it had become entertainment. While the internet joked, academia braced itself. Archaeologists and Egyptologists began issuing statements, hoping to calm the frenzy. Most agreed that while the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba are fascinating geological regions, no verified artifacts had ever been recovered that could be directly linked to the Exodus story. Dr. Amira Khalid of Cairo University called the viral wheel a classic case of choral pareidolia, the human brain seeing patterns where none exist. She explained that the seafloor of the Gulf is littered with coral-covered debris, including shipwreck fragments from the last few centuries. The debate turned philosophical. Could faith and science ever meet halfway on this? Or would each always accuse the other of missing the point? In the middle of all this, Ron Wyatt's name was suddenly trending. 25 years after his death, his old photos, grainy and faded, resurfaced everywhere. Interviews once buried in VHS archives were now streaming in 4K. People began revisiting his story, the self-taught explorer, the nurse anesthetist from Tennessee who claimed to have found everything from Noah's Ark to the Ark of the Covenant, and of course Pharaoh's chariot wheels. Wyatt's 4 explanations, Egypt's legal restrictions, coral incrustation, lack of funding, and institutional fear, began circulating again, this time reaching a whole new generation. And at the center of it all was his boldest claim, the golden chariot wheel. Wyatt had said it shimmered beneath the surface, untouched by coral, preserved in its brilliance. He claimed he turned it over to Egyptian authorities for safekeeping. But after that, nothing. No records, no museum listings, no photos, just silence. To skeptics, that silence screamed fabrication. To believers, it was proof of a cover-up. Either way, the mystery deepened. By the second week of the controversy, you couldn't scroll through social media without stumbling upon another expert analysis. 3D reconstructions popped up online showing digital models of what Pharaoh's chariot might have looked like, wheels spinning beneath animated waves. Church groups held live-streamed discussions. Archaeology podcasts hosted heated debates. Even mainstream historians, usually cautious about biblical topics, couldn't resist commenting. Some called it pseudoscience, others called it poetic truth. But the discussion had gone far beyond one man's claim. It had become a global reflection on faith itself. Because the real question wasn't, is that a wheel? It was, what if it is? As the noise began to fade, one haunting idea lingered. Maybe this wasn't just about archaeology. Maybe it was about humanity's endless hunger to see belief, to hold proof of the unseen. And so, the world found itself looking back toward that ancient sea, the one said to have swallowed an empire and saved a people. Archaeologist's fascination. For thousands of years, one story has refused to sink: the parting of the Red Sea. The image is unforgettable: a prophet raising his staff, waters rising like glass walls, an entire nation walking through the impossible. But for archaeologists, this isn't just a miracle. It's a mystery that won't let go. Every few decades, someone new decides to chase it. Scholars, explorers, divers, even software engineers with satellite data, all drawn by the same question: did it really happen? It's the ultimate tug-of-war between faith and science. And somewhere in the middle of that tension lies the fascination that keeps the Red Sea at the heart of archaeological debate. For most archaeologists, the Exodus story is irresistible precisely because it blurs the line between legend and history. If it's real, if the Israelites actually crossed a sea while fleeing Egypt, then we're looking at one of the greatest mass migrations in recorded history. And that's a big deal. Some researchers are driven by faith, hoping to confirm the Bible's literal truth. Others are skeptics, chasing logic through layers of sand and time. Yet both camps share the same thrill of the chase: the possibility that beneath the waves, or somewhere in the shifting deserts of Egypt, lies a fragment of the truth. The motivations vary, but the mission is the same: to map the geography of belief. Where exactly was Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, mentioned in the Hebrew text? Was it the modern Red Sea, or a shallower marsh-filled lake near the Nile Delta? Some point to the Gulf of Suez. Others insist it happened farther east, at the Gulf of Aqaba, the same waters Ron Wyatt once explored. Still others argue for the Bitter Lakes, or even the Lake Timsah region, where strong winds could push water aside just long enough for a desperate crossing. The debate has raged for decades, with no clear winner. But that's part of the allure. Every new theory feels like peeling back another layer of an ancient puzzle. Then there's the scientific side, the people who believe every miracle deserves at least one good physics experiment. Over the years, researchers have proposed everything from wind patterns to tectonic shifts as natural explanations for the parting of the sea. One particularly fascinating model comes from oceanographers who simulated something called wind set-down. The idea is that under certain conditions, strong winds blowing for hours in one direction can push water aside, exposing a temporary land bridge. In 2010, a group of scientists from the National Center for Atmospheric Research ran a computer simulation and found that hurricane-force winds, about 63 miles per hour, could indeed part shallow water for a few hours before it rushed back. The timing? Strikingly similar to what's described in Exodus. Other theories suggest a massive earthquake or volcanic event could have caused sudden tidal shifts. Some even connect the Exodus timeline to the cataclysmic eruption of Pharaoh, whose ash clouds could have darkened Egyptian skies, perhaps explaining the plagues in mythic form. Of course, none of this proves anything, but it does show one thing clearly. Scientists are just as captivated by this ancient story as the theologians are. They may not call it a miracle, but they'll admit it's one of nature's most enduring mysteries. Despite all the theories, there's still a problem. The evidence just isn't there. No Egyptian records mention a mass escape of Hebrew slaves. No army remnants have been found beneath the sea. No campsite matching the Exodus narrative has been uncovered in Sinai. That doesn't stop the hunt, though. In fact, it makes it even more tantalizing. At its heart, the fascination with the Exodus isn't just about proving or disproving a miracle. It's about understanding how humanity records hope. The Song of the Sea in Exodus 15 isn't a newspaper account. It's poetry, a victory hymn written by survivors, celebrating liberation. Whether the waves really parted or the story grew in the retelling, it speaks to something universal. The idea that even in the darkest pursuit, deliverance is possible. That's why the Red Sea keeps calling to scientists, historians, and believers alike. It's not just a place on a map, it's a mirror, reflecting the way we all search for meaning between evidence and faith. And yet the story still feels unfinished. More possible Red Sea discoveries. When the footage surfaced, the internet did what it does best: explode. Half the world gasped in awe, the other half rolled their eyes. "This is shocking," said commentator Greg Gutfeld. Either it's the greatest archaeological find of the century or the most expensive prank ever pulled. Then came the takedowns. Video after video quietly vanished from major platforms. Accounts posting the clips found themselves shadow banned or outright deleted. Naturally, that only made people more curious. Copies slipped through, bouncing between Telegram groups, mirrored servers, and Reddit threads like digital whispers. Every re-upload came with new captions, new theories, and one big question: who didn't want the world to see this? The divers' discovery in the Red Sea had done more than stir believers or annoy skeptics. It cracked open a door no one seemed able to close. If those coral-covered shapes really were Egyptian chariot wheels, if those faint, human remains were truly from Pharaoh's doomed army, then what else have we missed? What other pieces of the past still sleep beneath miles of sand and salt? But here's where it gets even more interesting. The search isn't just happening underwater anymore. Archaeology has gone digital. Artificial intelligence has officially joined the hunt. Gone are the days of dusty journals and lone explorers squinting at broken pottery. Today's explorers wear VR headsets and feed ancient maps into algorithms. AI now scans satellite data, decodes seabed topography, and even reads weathered inscriptions no human eye could decipher. It's as if history itself has started speaking again, through code. Take the Yucatan Peninsula, for example. In 2018, researchers used deep learning algorithms and LiDAR scans to uncover more than 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures hidden beneath the jungle canopy. Whole cities, invisible to humans for centuries, suddenly came into view. The past, quite literally, came back to life. Or look at the repair project in Italy. There, AI-driven robots were trained to reassemble fragile artifacts from Pompeii. Imagine thousands of broken shards scattered across tables, pieces of pottery, statues, frescoes, all digitally scanned and matched by algorithms that understand the difference between a human fingerprint and a painter's brushstroke. What once took teams of experts years can now be done in months. And now, it's pointing its lens toward the Red Sea. Using underwater mapping, machine vision, and satellite thermal imaging, AI systems can detect unusual patterns, like geometric shapes, buried anomalies, or metallic densities that might indicate something unnatural beneath the waves. Something human, something ancient. Think about that. The same technology that finds lost airplanes or predicts volcanic eruptions could be tracing the path of an ancient miracle. And here's where things get philosophical. What happens when science starts confirming details of stories once considered purely myth? Does that make the stories truer, or does it just make us realize how much we still don't know? Because if AI can read the Earth like a memory, scanning layers of rock, sand, and sea to reconstruct what really happened, then maybe history isn't as fixed as we thought. Maybe those old texts and tablets weren't just poetry or parable. Maybe they were eyewitness accounts written in a language we're only now learning to translate. And as AI continues to peer deeper into the Red Sea's abyss, one can't help but wonder, if Pharaoh's wheel has surfaced, what else lies beyond it, hidden in the sands of Sinai? What's your take on this? Share your perspective in the comments section. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.